All right, it is 7 o'clock, so we're going to get started. I want to thank everyone for joining us and for spending your evening with us. I hope that you have had the opportunity over the past week to take a deep breath and to relax and to take some time for yourself, because we have to re-energize ourselves because we have a lot of work to do. So again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jess Mazur. I am the Sierra Club Iowa Chapter Conservation Coordinator. And tonight we are going to be talking about what happened in the 2020 election. And a lot of that you already know, so it's going to be a little bit of a review, but the most important part we're saving for the end, and that's where do we go from here? Because we know that we don't stop at elections. The most important work happens in between the elections. So let's get going. So our take on the election results is the good first. We'll start with that. Is Biden won the popular vote and the Electoral College. We maintained control of the U.S. House of Representatives, although we lost some seats. Here in Iowa, Representative Axne won her race and will continue to be our U.S. Congresswoman. And for the most part, elections are over, but there are two really important races in Georgia that can help decide who controls the Senate. And we know that that's really important because if we have a Democratic-controlled House, a Democratic president, but a Republican Senate, it's going to be hard to push a legislation through. We'll see a lot of gridlock. So if you do have any time, look up how you can volunteer down in Georgia and make some calls, because we can control all three chambers, then there's a lot that we can do in the next 4 years. But one of the most important things to me, the thing that I'm the most excited about, is the fact that issues won across the country. Even in states where we saw a pretty 50-50 divide between Trump and Biden, we saw ballot initiatives pass with overwhelming majority, so sometimes 70%, and even in red states. So it shows us that a lot of times elections can be very partisan. We see a very stark divide, but when it comes down to the issues, a lot of people are with us on the issues and it crosses party line. So I'm going to go through just a few of those here. And we have Florida. So who would think that Florida would raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour? Or the fact that 4 states legalize or decriminalize marijuana: New Jersey, Arizona, Montana, and South Dakota. Colorado passed the creation of a family medical leave system. Nebraska, our neighbor, passed a cap on payday loan interest rates. And California voted to restore felon voting rights. And in Ohio, this is of utmost interest to people probably on this webinar, is there were 2 green energy initiatives that passed. And basically how I understand these initiatives is that it kind of puts all of the ratepayers together in one bargaining unit so they can bargain for better rates and better infrastructure. And in that process that they're going to go to 100% green energy by 2023. So I think that's really important to note, because we know that issues bring people into our movement. Issues have people find homes in our movement. We hope they find a home with Sierra Club, and they activate people so that we can win elections in the future. Other really good news is that we had record turnout voting here in the state and across the country. In Iowa, we had 1,697,000 Iowans vote, which is 76% of all registered voters. And of that 1.7-ish million Iowans that voted, over 1 million of those were absentee ballots. So I think that has a lot to do obviously with COVID, but I know that that's going to be a big deal, I think, in the future of voting as well, to make it easier for people to vote and increase access to the polls. So I'm going to go through here to the next one. Before the election, we had a makeup of the Iowa House at 53-47 and 32-18 for the Senate, and then obviously Governor Kim Reynolds. We still have a majority Republican House, governor office, and Senate. The races are all pretty much called, although the Des Moines Register has 4 races that are still undecided. And I think that's just because they're so close. They're waiting to see if there's a request for a recount or anything like that. But they're pretty much called. So it looks like, we're going to have, again, a Republican House, Republican Senate, and Republican governor's office. So that's what we're working with. So some of the things that we did this election cycle were we sent out environmental questionnaires to candidates. We wanted to make endorsements and wanted to pull some of our weight here in the state to help down ballot races for people who are going to be making decisions on some of the bills that we're working on at the Capitol. So we sent them out to pretty much every candidate in the state, and almost everyone who completed the survey was endorsed, but there were a large number of candidates who didn't complete the survey. The survey focused on a lot of issues, but notably clean water, renewable energy, voter access to the polls, and Iowa's bottle deposit law. And we'll dig into that a little bit later. So the candidates that we endorsed them because we thought there was an opportunity to flip a seat or to hold a seat that was important to us because it's the legislator that has been really strong on our issues. And so in total, we endorsed 85 candidates, 1 presidential, 3 US House, 11 state Senate, and 70 state House. And so what we did to actually engage Sierra Club members across the state is we made phone calls, and we called over 500 Sierra Club members in 10 state house districts. You can see below, those are the candidates that we made calls for. And 2 of those candidates won their races. So Steve Hansen in House District 14 and Eric Jurdy in House District 67. So we're really excited for them. And if our other candidates run again, we'll be excited to support them again as well. And then I'm going to go through these next slides rather quickly, but this is just a list of all of the candidates that we did endorse. If they're bold, they won their race. This slideshow will be available after if you really want to dig in and look at all of the names, but we did think it was important to show you that. So I'll leave this one on here for just a minute so you can scan it. And then we'll go on to the next one. We had to make 2 pages for the Iowa House because there's just so many of them. Okay, so we did a little bit of recap, but we also have some great news that I thought was really important to share, that at least 4 environmentalists were elected as County Soil and Water Conservation District commissioners. So Sharon Donovan in Dallas County, Becky Higgins in Cerro Gordo County, our very own Katie Rock, who is a Sierra Club staff member. She won her race in Polk County, and Tommy Hexter in Poweshiek County. So this is going to be really important to start getting our people into elected positions. And this specific position has a lot to do with funding and funding allocation and different projects that have to do with soil and water. So this is really important. We want to congratulate everyone that won, and just know that we should see more of our names on those lists next time. So the bad, we do have to go over, unfortunately, the bad, because realistically, not everything was good this election. Like we said a minute ago, Republicans maintained control of the Iowa House and the Senate and the gubernatorial office. Iowa was overwhelmingly supporting Trump. You can see the map there on the right. 53% of Iowans support Trump and 45% supported Biden. For US House, Ernst beat Greenfield, so Senator Ernst has her seat again. And in House District 4, Feenstra beat J.D. Schulten. House District 1, Henson beat Finkenauer, who was our current congressional member. And then in House District 2, it's almost a virtual tie. Mary Miller Meeks is ahead by 40 votes against Rita Hart. There's going to be a recount, so we'll be monitoring to see how that plays out. But I think that does show us that our votes really do count. Like, all of us probably know a few people in House District 2. And so when it comes time for the next election cycle, we need to, not leave any stone unturned, because it can come down to just 40 votes. Bad news also, Trump has not conceded. We're still going to operate knowing that Biden won. We don't believe that anything that Trump is doing with lawsuits is going to hold. So we're operating as if Biden won. We'll still monitor that because we know that, with Trump, anything could happen, but we don't see any validity in any of the lawsuits. And he may not concede. He may accept the results, but not actually concede. So we'll keep monitoring that. And, there is a chance that, he tries to create more chaos between now and January. But we can safely say that Biden won this election, and in January, he'll be taking over the office of the presidency. Other not so good news is Republicans registered more new voters than Democrats. And the reason I wanted to make note of that is because it is important that we bring new people into our movement. Because when we just try to reorganize existing voters or existing activists, the numbers are always going to turn out kind of the same. But if we bring new people in, if we activate people that are not engaged in our work or in elections, then we can actually increase the electorate and have a better chance of winning. And then what we all know, unfortunately, is that rural America is strongly in favor of Trump. And I think that's especially important for us being a rural state, because we have a lot of work to do. We can't just accept this and say, well, this is how Iowa is going to be. It hasn't always been this way here in Iowa, and we can change that, but we have to work with people that have been disenfranchised, that believe that the system is not working for them anymore. When you look at issues impacting rural Iowans, it's very similar to issues impacting urban Iowans. In rural Iowa, we're seeing hospitals close. There's a lot of counties in Iowa that don't even have maternity wards anymore. So healthcare is an issue no matter whether you live in rural Iowa or urban Iowa. Education, we're seeing schools close and consolidate. Education is important whether you're in rural Iowa or urban Iowa. Water crosses boundaries. Water flows from the north to the south, and that impacts everyone along those routes. So the issues that impact rural Iowa and urban Iowa and everything that's in between are really the same. It's how we message it. It's how we talk to voters and how we talk about, so what's going on in your town? Are you seeing businesses close? Are your schools consolidating? How do we invest in education? And that includes rural areas. So I think that's really important to know that we have a big role in turning this around, because we are one of the states that we've seen slowly start to go to red from purple. So wanted to point that out as well. So this is what I said is what's really important for what we do now, because elections guide our strategy. We have a few years here on the state level for the next election. We have 4 years before the next big federal presidential election. So we have to be strategic, because our movement only has so much time and so much capacity, and we have to make the biggest impact that we can. So realistically, during the 2021 legislative session, which starts in January, we're going to be on defense. We're going to be having to monitor the bills that the Republicans are putting forth and seeing what we can do to stop those bills. It's not going to be a big priority of ours to push some of the big pieces of legislation, like a moratorium on factory farms or other environmental protections, because realistically, a lot of those bills are not likely to pass. So we're going to be strategic with this. We're going to be your eyes and ears of the Capitol, and we'll let you know what's going on and when it's important to take action. So since we're going to not put all of our effort into the legislative session, what we really need to do is focus on the issues to build our base of activists here in the state. And we're going to dig into those specific campaigns here in a little bit, but that's got to be what we focus on. We need to meet people where they're at. We need to ask them what's impacting their lives. We need to tell them about our values and the vision that we have for the state. And we need to bring people in. We have to talk to them. Sending an email and inviting someone is not always the best way anymore. Somebody told me something when I started organizing about a decade ago, and it's really stuck with me. And it's the number one reason people don't get involved or they don't show up is because nobody asked them. And so that means we have to actually talk to people on the phone, in person, obviously taking COVID precautions right now, but we actually have to reach out and not just think that people are going to come find us. We have to go find them. Over the next year, we have a lot of work to do in Iowa, especially in rural areas. We're going to be doing some of that with our soils policy that we'll be talking about in a little bit. And another thing that we are paying attention to is that Biden is going to have the opportunity to appoint people to federal positions. One of the ones we're really focused on is the EPA, to see who the new EPA administrator is, who's in charge of all of the regions, because our Iowa actually implements some federal policies like the Clean Water Act, the Clean Power Plan, the Clean Air Act. And so we have the ability to use rural making and to use other measures to push our policies through without having to worry about doing legislation through Congress. So for some of you long-term Sierra Club members, you know that we've been involved in a Clean Water Act campaign. We want the state of Iowa to enforce the Clean Water Act for factory farms here in the state. They have failed to do so far. And that's been about a 10-year campaign. But over the last 4 years, basically since Trump, we've had to kind of tone back that campaign because we don't want any major decisions made with the current people that are in power. So things like that are gonna change once Biden takes the presidency, because we'll have new people in charge of agencies. So we'll see some openings with the Clean Water Act campaign, the Clean Power Plan, and the Clean Air Act, and we're excited to see what opportunities arise with those. So here on the state level, we already talked about this, but it's unlikely that our bills are going to gain traction. So we are going to have to just work on stopping bad bills. Some of the bad bills that we foresee could happen, and again, there's probably a ton that we haven't even thought of yet that'll pop up, but we're monitoring IWIL. Some of the recent bills for IWIL actually change the funding allocation. So IWIL is basically increasing funding for parks and natural resources, and the legislature is trying to mess with how that money is spent and where it's allocated. So we're going to be monitoring that. A big one that we think we're going to see this session is the grocery stores want to roll back Iowa's bottle deposit law. So right now, if you sell pop or whatever it is, whatever bottle that you can return for a bottle deposit, you have to also take those back if there's not a can redemption center within 10 miles. And so the grocers want to change that to 15 miles, which really makes it so a lot of grocery stores no longer have to take cans and bottles back. And the result of that, we know, is that we're going to have more trash on the side of the road. We're going to have more trash on the side, in our rivers, in our lakes, because, you know, if it's 15 miles, that's a 30-mile round trip to redeem your cans and bottles. And it's just common sense that not everyone's going to be willing to do that. So that's going to be something that's really important that we protect. And just a heads up of, you know, I think it's important that we understand their messaging so that we can craft our messaging better. What we're hearing from the grocery industry is that they don't want to take cans back because of COVID. And I understand that. I get that. But if that's truly the only reason, they also wouldn't have a pharmacy in their store. They wouldn't have dry cleaners. If it's Hy-Vee, a lot of Hy-Vees have dry cleaners, because those are also methods of bringing something into the store. This is something that the grocery industry has been trying to do for quite a while. I think that's just their latest talking point, taking advantage of the situation that we're in. We know that Iowa's bottle deposit law has protected our rivers and streams for a long time, and we need to make sure that it stays in place. So that's something we're going to have on our radar. We also think that there could be some deregulation for parks and wildlife. We don't know quite what that will be yet, but we will be monitoring. And then, as most of you know, recently Governor Reynolds reinstated felon voting rights. She didn't do it with enough time for it to really have a big impact this session. I tried to find some numbers on the number of felons who voted this election cycle, and those just haven't been put out yet. But the legislature could go in and pass some legislation trying to remove felon voting rights. So we'll keep our eye out for that. We know it's important to restore felon voting rights. That's our right to vote, and you know, people deserve that right. Two utility board seats are going to be up, and so we're going to weigh in on who takes over those two seats. We want to make sure that the Utilities Board is as strong as possible. All of you probably remember the Dakota Access Pipeline. The Utilities Board is the authority that approved a lot of those permits and allowed that to go through. So it's important who's on those seats, because we could see another pipeline, we could see, you know, who knows what that the Utilities Board is going to have to deal with. There's also potential for opportunity for some solar, wind, and storage tax credits, which might be the only semi-good thing this session. We'll be monitoring that, and we will let you know. And then last, we heard that there's going to be a task force for carbon sequestration. And that's something that's of interest to us when we get later on. We'll talk about our soil policy. But we want to pay attention to what they're doing, who's on it, what their goals are. So we will monitor that for you as well. But again, this all starts in January, so we're just kind of guessing what we think is going to happen. Pam Mackey-Taylor, many of you know her, she's our lobbyist. She does an incredible job of maintaining relationships with legislators and keeping everyone updated. And then I'll be working hard to reach out to you all when it's time to take action through action alerts, sending emails. You know, we don't know if legislators are going to have like in-person meetings like they have in the past in their districts because of COVID. But if there's Zoom meetings or other opportunities to weigh in, we're going to let you know, because it's important that people are involved in the political process, because our legislators need to know that we're watching them. So this is what I really want to dig into, is our plans for issue campaigns. Because if we remember back when we were talking about those ballot initiatives, even in places where everything was a stark partisan divide between Republicans and Democrats, we saw issues won. So we know that that is how we can bring people into our movement. So what we're going to do is we are going to be identifying new people to engage them in our work. That means a lot of phone calls and events as best we can do them with COVID. But we're actually going to go seek out people, not just going to wait for someone to come find us. But that means we're going to be asking you guys to help us with that, because, you know, I can only make so many phone calls, and, you know, we can have a bigger impact if lots of us are doing different things like that. So the issue campaigns that we're going to be focusing on, the first one I'm really excited about is the people's budget. And, you know, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty details of the budget, but we want to start big picture. And we believe that a budget is really just a system of values. If we value education, we're going to fully fund education. If we value the health of the people here in the state, we're going to fully fund healthcare. If we value water and soil and wildlife and parks, then we're going to fully fund those as well. And when we look at our budget right now, we see the total opposite. We see corporate tax breaks for big out-of-state corporations. We see underfunded agencies. You know, there's a lot of things that, if we take a look at what those values really mean, it's that we're valuing profits over people, is that we're valuing allowing a corporation to save some money at the expense of a child who's not getting a proper education. So we're going to really dig in. It's going to be a long-term campaign, and we're going to have a series of webinars, but we're really going to start with value system. I think this campaign also gives us a really unique opportunity to build a coalition and a network with groups that might not be environmental groups, but they also care about the budget. So that means healthcare workers, that means labor, that means educators, because we all have this interest in making sure that we have a budget that works for us and is not just working for big corporations. So that'll be something that we dig in on. We have our first webinar for that going to be in December. So I will send something out once we get that on the calendar. And we really hope that you'll join us, and hope you'll invite others to join us, because I think this is going to be an opportunity to really, like I said, build an important coalition in Iowa that can help us win future elections. I've got a drink of water here. The next one is also of extreme interest of mine, is soils policy. So we know that soil is more than just dirt. It's a living, breathing thing. It grows the food that we eat. And what's really important that we're learning now is that it can actually capture carbon from the air and help mitigate climate change. And some studies show that soil can actually capture more carbon than some forests and other areas like that. So we have a big role here in Iowa to help mitigate climate change because we have this black gold that covers our state from north to south, from Mississippi to the Missouri, and we can actually make a big impact on mitigating climate change. So the soils policy that we have, it's right now a big document that has a lot of really good information on the type of farming practices that'll protect our soil, and what doesn't protect our soil, how we can help farmers transition, because we know that we can't just let farmers kind of hang out on the line to dry saying do it this way. We have to come up with a way to transition our farmers, because this mess that we're in right now is not the farmer's fault. It is the corporate agriculture industry that has pushed this model of farming across our state and really trapped our farmers in the system of get bigger, get out, of keep going into debt to build more factory farms, to have a farming system where we have high chemical input, to where we are treating the soil like dirt. We're allowing it to run off into our water. Many of you might or might not know that Iowa has an average soil loss of 5.5 tons per acre per year. Like, that is literally our black gold, and there is no way we should be allowing that to just wash downstream. One, because that's how we are going to continue farming in the state. Some studies are showing that Iowa, if we continue soil loss at this rate, might only have farming for another 60 years before we've lost all of our topsoil. But the other big reason is that when that soil leaves the land, it runs off into our streams and it carries what's with it into our water. And that's why we're seeing a lot of algal blooms. We're seeing high nitrate because phosphorus and nitrogen are leaving the land and entering our water. So one of the things we're going to do around that is we're going to be talking to farmers all across the state who are already transitioning their farms, who are doing it right, who have conservation practices and crop rotations and a diverse farming operation. And we're also going to be talking to farmers that are actively transitioning. And then we're going to talk to farmers who are interested but want to know more. And I think that's going to give us a good opportunity to kind of build another unique coalition of urban and rural and farmers and non-farmers, and really talk about how can a soil policy, how can protecting our soil actually benefit farmers and benefit the climate at the same time. So that's going to be a really exciting campaign that we're working on. If you have not looked at our soil policy, but you like to read those kind of things, then just Google Iowa Sierra Club soil policy and it should pop right up. And then I can always send out a link to that as well after the webinar for anyone who's interested. Other campaigns that we're going to be working on are clean water and natural resources. Like I said, there was the Clean Water Act campaign that Sierra Club has been involved in with Iowa CCI for the last 10 plus years. So we'll take a look at that as well. We're going to look at how we protect natural resources and how we get people engaged at different parks and different ways that they can connect with nature, and we can kind of bring them into some of our more issue campaigns like soils policy and people's budget. And then lastly, wildlife. And I'm actually, Pam, I want to pass it off to you if you don't mind talking a little bit more about the wildlife, because I know that's kind of your forte.
So a number of the wildlife issues that may come up are protecting the black bear from hunting pressure. We've got a major report that is coming into the DNR this year, starting sometime either late this year or early January, on the status of the turtle harvest and the laws that were put in place a few years ago to protect the turtles. So there are a lot of things that dealing with wildlife that are coming up that aren't necessarily based on the legislature, but we're going to have to keep on top of because of the pressure to get rid of parkland and reduce public lands.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So how are we going to do all this? Like I said earlier, it's going to be focused on organizing. I like this quote I found. You can see it in the picture here, but it says, "I am an organizer. I bring people together so that they can unlock the beauty and power and wisdom that's in these streets and job sites and back roads. And then we get out there and demand changes that our people need." So everyone, all of us are organizers. We all have the ability to bring people together, whether that's over the phone, whether that's in person. We're going to be asking a lot of Sierra Club members over the next year to actually help us build this network across the state so that we can win on the issues that we want. So that's going to be like our direct building the base thing, but we have to get the message out. You know, I think that this election shows us that messaging is really important. Trump's message, although it's horrific and disgusting, it resonated with a lot of people, unfortunately. So we have to think about how do we talk about our issues and how do we present them in a way that people are open to the idea and open to answering the phone when we do call them about something. So we're going to need your help with letters to the editor, with social media. If you haven't already, on Facebook, find us. It's the Sierra Club Iowa chapter. And we'll be sharing different articles and ideas and events. And, you know, if you can share it as well on your page, we can amplify that and get it out to more people. Another thing that we're interested in is there's a lot of talk radio out there, and I don't think our movement has really utilized that as well as we could. So if you're listening to the radio, you're listening to Clay Masters on IPR, and he says, call in and let me know your thoughts on soil. Call in, let's utilize that. Be someone that is a messenger and talk about it. You don't have to know all the facts. You don't have to know everything, but it's about values, it's about ideas. And that's something that we all know. We all know that we want to protect our water and why that's important. So don't be afraid to call in and get your message out there. And then lastly, blog posts. We're going to be utilizing the website to put up talking points and ideas and share thoughts and updates on our campaigns. And so we could really use your help sharing those as well, because a big part of what we do, we have to not only bring people in, but we have to communicate our message very clearly, very succinctly, and in a way that excites people and gets them involved. And then obviously we're keeping an eye out for the bad things. We'll let you know when to take action. We'll send you an email that says click here to take action. Some of you probably saw that recently on a campaign to stop Pattison Sand, which is a frac sand mining company that wanted to drill a well into the Jordan Aquifer so that they can pump and sell water out of state. It was a bad deal for Iowa. The DNR had said no 3 times, and Pattison Sand was going to try a back route with the Governor Reynolds and with some appeals. But we had over 500 Sierra Club members send a message to the governor, which I think had a big impact. And then I think that is probably not the only, but one of the big reasons that Pattison Sand has decided to delay their proposal. They're going to wait a year and revisit this again after they can see about markets. But I know that all the messages that Sierra Club members sent definitely had an impact. We had letters to the editor, we did press releases, we had a webinar, and a combination of all of that is successful. And obviously a year is not that long. We're going to, you know, monitor it and make sure that they don't come back. But that's basically what is going to happen if we see other things like that. So get an email to click here and take action. We might do a webinar. And so we're going to need your help doing that, especially during the legislative session. So before we get to questions and answers, I just wanted to go over some ways to stay updated. So we have a legislative email list that we're going to be using. Normally we try not to email people too many times, because we don't want someone to just mark us as spam or anything. But legislative session, we do want to be able to reach out to people a little more frequently, especially if something pops up last minute. So we're gonna have a special legislative email list that we'll use just to keep people updated on the session. As soon as we get a link to sign up for the legislative email list, we will send that out. Likely it's going to be in the next newsletter that goes out for November. In December, we're going to have 2 webinars, People's Budget and People's Budget 2. We'll get you those dates and you'll get an invitation just like you did for this webinar. And we'll hope that you join us, and if you'll invite other people to really take a new stance on what a budget is and why does it matter, and what values does it show. And then we're obviously going to be doing a lobby training legislative session 101. That'll be an interesting one because we have to think differently about the session with COVID. Like I said, we might not see those in-district meetings. We're probably not going to be able to go up to the Capitol. But there are going to be a lot of other ways that we can lobby our legislators through emails, through calls, through texts, and who knows what else we'll come up with. So it'll be a good lobby training because we'll have to think about that a little differently. And then there is a website where you can sign up to volunteer. So if you know that you want to help make calls, if you made calls for the election and you enjoyed it and you know that you're very good at it, then please help us by signing up for the volunteer interest, because then we'll follow up with you, and we have it's a little easier when we know that we need to call 500 people if we already have a list of 20 people who said I'm willing to make calls. It just helps spread out the work and allows us to be a little more effective. So that is what I have right now for our election debrief and where do we go from here. I think the big takeaways are that the most important work happens in between the elections, and that issues are what bring people into our movement. And in order to do that, we have to organize. We have to reach out to people. We have to ask them to join us. We have to have conversations with people, and we have to just organize. So those are my big takeaways. And I really hope that you enjoyed this. And if you have any questions, you should have a Q&A button. And then you can just type in your question there, and Pam will be able to see those and let me know if we have any questions. Pam, are there any questions in there?
There are no questions, but we do have a comment from Marty Anderson. She's a state rep from the Des Moines area. And she said this information is really helpful. And what I think we should do is after we're done, we'll send out a link to the slides so that she can see what she's missing. And those of you who want to look at it a little bit more can see those.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Anderson, for hopping on. We really appreciate that. Pam, I'm not able to unmute right now, but if you are able, would Representative Anderson want to make a few comments about what she thinks about the election? Are you able to unmute her?
So Representative Anderson had to leave the meeting. She had to go somewhere else.
Okay, I gotcha. Well, bummer. That would have been nice to have her say a few words, but I actually just moved and she's my new state rep, so that's kind of exciting that she's on here. So, yeah.
Yes, there are 9 people. If we want to, we probably could have a discussion since there are only 9 of us on the call.
Okay.
And that means we would unmute everybody.
I can't unmute anyone, so you'll have to, if you're able to do that. All right, sounds like you're all being unmuted. So if there's a comment or something that you want to add, you're more than welcome to do so. This just must mean that we did such a good job with our analysis and our looking forward section that nobody has any questions. Well, if no one has anything else, then I think we will end the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We hope that it inspires you to get involved over the next year and to know a little bit about the things that we're going to be working on. I think that the people's budget and the soils policy are two really exciting things that are really going to help us ramp up our work here in the state. So we really hope that you can get involved in that. And then again, legislative session, we will be letting you know when it's time to take action. I'm sure we're going to have to do so a few times this session. So thank you. I hope you have a good evening and we will talk to you soon.